So, this is the 7th part in our series of the nature of reality, and I'm going to do a bit of a recap for those of you that haven't been here for the other ones. But if you ever want to listen or watch online, you can take the little red card away from the seat in front of you, and that'll give you the information as to how to actually get the messages, and you can either do the podcast or see it on YouTube or watch the whole thing on our website. And if you want to be on our mailing list, the blue one, you can just fill that in and we'll let you know the events that are coming up. But I always have a bit of a disclaimer at the beginning because, here we are in a church talking about the nature of reality, and for some reason it seems incongruous why we should be talking about the nature of reality when perhaps we should be talking about God. And I think the two things have to be together. We have to be talking about what's real here. Otherwise, we're just living in an idealized, fabricated reality that just makes us feel good. So what we want, our purpose here at the Aspen Chapel is to learn together how to live our lives more skillfully. That's the whole purpose of it. And looking at what is real, what the nature of reality is, enables us to live our lives, I think, more skillfully. Everything really is about reality. Religion, relationships, politics. Nowadays we have alternative facts. What is the reality? And so far, we began by looking at how we decide what's real and what's not. And the idea that perspective is important. The perspective that we have. How we see things changes through history, and it changes throughout our life. Years ago, the earth was seen as being flat. It was a fact years ago until Galileo came along, and now we see things differently. Our perspectives are shaped by our culture. And so we looked at that whole thing about perspective. In the Middle Ages, there was God up there, Jesus on the right hand, and if you didn't believe that, you were tortured and killed. So everybody did believe that. But nowadays, we think about quarks and things like that. And, the way that we look at reality changes. And the second week, we looked at the fact that it's our minds that work out what's going on. Our minds decode reality, decode what's happening. But in fact, our minds are like organic virtual reality headsets, in that everything is processed by our minds, and our minds tell us what's going on, tell us what we're perceiving. It's all sort of happening in here. And our minds, we think we're our minds. Our minds make us think we're our minds. Yes, you are your mind says to you. Believe what it says. But as we know, we want to say here, we're not just our rational minds. There's a body mind going on as well. We have our cultural mind. There's a planetary mind that makes the world go round. There's a universal mind that, there's much more to it than just that. But we're not just our minds. We're our hearts. We're also our communities. And so we looked at the way that our minds filter things. Often they get it wrong. And next we looked at the one thing we know, which is our consciousness. What we feel, we see, we hear, we touch. This is really, our consciousness is our interface with reality. But as Joseph Campbell said, the big question nowadays is, Joseph Campbell said, am I the bulb that carries the light, or am I the light of which the bulb is a vehicle? Is consciousness pre-existent and that we are tuning into it in our minds? Or does our mind create consciousness? Now, we would probably go, in the chapel, we'd go with the first one, that there is a pre-existing consciousness. But no one's worked this out yet, and it is still out there as being a key thing to work out. Is consciousness a product of the brain, or is the brain a product of some greater consciousness that not only produces something like a brain over evolution, but then uses it to become a vehicle for that consciousness to become aware of itself? So consciousness is a, tricky subject. The Dalai Lama says that consciousness is actually the facility we have to know. It's the facility to know, to be aware. It is the latent sea of being that we emerge from and use to know and to be aware. So we then went on to look at our place within evolution, the evolution of the material world and the evolution of consciousness. That consciousness has been evolving since the Big Bang. From that moment 13.7 billion years ago, there was a universal mind. There was an order that came along. Eric Ringsby, one of our members here, came up with a definition of consciousness. He said it was the divine operating system necessary for life. But there is some sort of a mind that was there and has been developing ever since. That operating system has produced the universe, the earth, and life. And now finally us. We are the flower of that evolution. We are the universe made conscious of itself. Then we went into quantum physics. Quantum physics brought the idea of a holism. The idea that there is a one consciousness. And quantum physics identifies the observer as part of the system, pointing to a fundamental role of consciousness in material reality. So the idea really is that all this comes from a one. We came from the Big Bang. We are products of the Big Bang. Not only do we come from the same place, but our very existence is connected. And this interconnectivity is manifested in global consciousness that we're all, aware of. Something happens in China, and we hear about it 5 minutes later. We talked about the rationality understood through quantum physics, and we then went on to quantum entanglement. This is so very complicated, but this is where we went to, which is described as a counterintuitive phenomenon that explains how two subatomic particles can be intimately linked to each other, even if they're separated by millions of light years of space. Those vast distances, and yet they're still connected. How can it be? Well, actually, I came up with a sort of way of explaining it this week that I thought I'd show you. Here we are. Here are four, sort of things miles apart in the universe. And quantum entanglement says they're connected, and yet we can't see how they're connected. But if we look about how the universe is unfolded, and we actually put it together like this, we can actually see that in the unfolding of the universe, that all these four things actually came from and are within the same place. So in the unfolding of the universe, they were together and they unfolded like this. And quantum entanglement says that although they are billions of miles apart, because they were fundamentally connected originally, they are still connected. And that creates a sort of relationship between all things. Ilia Delio, who's coming next year, she said, if reality is non-local, that is, if things can affect one another despite the distance of time or space coordinates, then nature is not composed of material substances, but rather deeply entangled fields of energy. Deeply entangled fields of energy. The nature of the universe is undivided wholeness. Because our consciousness has emerged from this wholeness and continues to be a part of it, then what accounts for the human mind is active in the universe. There's a mirror of the human mind and what's active in the universe. Those who were here yesterday about the Mayan calendar, and those who were here at the James Webb Telescope event at the Institute, very similar sorts of concepts. All of which took us to last week, and this is still previously on, but never mind, took us to last week the idea that all of the universe is connected and that we are all of a one. And that oneness, I am the universal conscious experienced as Nicholas, and there we have, you are the universal consciousness experienced as Bob, and we experience that universal consciousness as our individual nature. And what people call peak experiences is really an experience of that connectivity, of the universal mind being at the center of all things, what some people call the ground of all being. And our role in life is to work out how to cooperate with being part of that oneness. How do we cooperate and be part of that oneness? It's like we're all handcuffed together and we have to work out how to cook and serve a meal with us all handcuffed together. It takes time and effort to actually work out how to cooperate with that. The alternative to oneness is to think that we're separate. And we look at really the nature of reality. The alternative is to think that we're separate, which most of the world does. Most of the world, if you go out there, if you listen to the news, everything is separate. But that idea of separateness has consequences. Daniel Bohm, the theoretical physicist, saw the universe as one whole, an unbroken whole, and he remarked on separateness. He says, the notion that all these fragments are separately existent is evidently an illusion. And this illusion cannot do other than lead to endless conflict and confusion. Indeed, the attempt to live according to the notion that the fragments are really separate is, in essence, what has led to the growing series of extremely urgent crises that's confronting us today, and the creation of an overall environment that's neither physically nor mentally healthy for most of the people who live in it. Individually, there has developed a widespread feeling of helplessness and despair. In the face of what seems to be an overwhelming mass of disparate social forces going beyond the control and even the comprehensions of the human beings who are caught up in it. So that separateness creates this extraordinary feeling that you can't do anything about it. But I want to suggest that if you take it as a whole, then it does enable you to think that you can do something about it. If the universe is truly a whole, that transforms this experience. Because we are a part of that whole, as Ilya was saying. We are individually, and together we are a part of that whole. Each of us is uniquely linked to everything else. We're not sort of random particles floating around this earth with 8 billion other random particles. We fit completely into the rest of the whole. Each of us fits in it, like a jigsaw puzzle. Do you call them jigsaw, or do you call them picture puzzles here? Like jigsaw puzzles, they're all connected. Our bits of life fit exactly into the bits of life of those that are around us. And if that's true, now this is the important bit. This is what we're here to discuss today. If that's true, then our lives matter. Because our lives are a unique part of that puzzle. And they have meaning. Our lives have meaning to all the bits that are around our particular part of the puzzle. If there is a universal mind, a universal consciousness, a ground of all being, and we are a part of that, then we are a working part of that whole. We are a part of the plan. And therefore, what we do matters because we're connected. Now, all this, life may seem pretty random, but it's not. I'm suggesting there is an order at work. This is another way of saying God and religion, but I'm saying, there is an order at work. You may think, we look at, what we've got. You may think that the hand that you've been dealt in your life, the hand you've been dealt with all your problems and issues, you may think it's a pair of fives. And that you're never going to win with a pair of fives. You're never going to make a difference to the world with just a pair of fives. But what if the game was fixed? So that when you played your pair of fives in the way they were meant to be played, it was a winning hand. Now, my uncle was a professor of inorganic chemistry. He was also liked to think he was extremely good at bridge. And my brother and I, we were 12 and 10, and we used to play bridge with him. And he would just wipe the floor with us every time. And I remember this one time, he went off to the loo. And I took the deck of cards. And I stacked the deck. So my brother and I got all the spades. And then we bid 7 spades. He thought we were completely mad. We wiped the floor with him. We made 7 spades, those of you know bridge. He didn't think it was at all funny afterwards. He thought it was not at all funny. But what I'm suggesting here is that, what if, like the deck, I'd like to suggest that the deck that we're playing in life is also fixed. That we are all one part of a complete moving integral whole. And the trick is to learn to play our hand to the maximum effect. And if we do that, then we win. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount is all about cashing in on this idea. The Sermon on the Mount is all about this idea. Why do you think he says then, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, or your body, what you'll wear. Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, yet their heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more than these? But seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. What he's saying, and it's right the way through the Sermon on the Mount, is that life will look after you if you prioritize the deepest part of you, your connection with that universal mind, the cosmic mind, the mind of Christ. It repeats in Romans 8, all things count for good for those that love the Lord. Now, that sounds very religious, but what it really means is that you put first your connection, then everything counts for good. Everything is a plus. The implications of this, that everything that comes to us, this is the important bit. The implication of this is that everything that comes to us, all the circumstances in our life, are not random, but a part of an interconnectivity. And if we respond not with rejection to the circumstances that come our way, but with welcome, then we're able to play the hand of our lives to the greatest effect, because it is connected to everything else. It will have an impact. So how does this work? Well, it works because the fundamental currency that makes the world go round is love. Let me explain it. I'm not saying it's a sort of feely, emotional way type stuff. I'm saying it's the way that the world actually works. Now, my definition of love is giving with no expectation of a return. Okay? Giving with no expectation of a return. Now, when we love, it's not some bargain or method of exchange. It is giving that expects nothing in return. I would suggest that at the Big Bang, the universe was given with no expectation of return. There was no deal. It was just there. And everything else has happened in exactly the same way. Everything has moved. There has been forward movement without an expectation of return. You were given your lives with no expectation of return. No one's come to you and said, oi, here's the bill. No, your life was given to you absolutely freely. So I'd like to suggest that the fundamental creative force is the giving with no expectation of return. Now, again, back to Ilia Delio. This is what she says about love. She says, every single living being is born from the depths of matter and from the depths of love, because every being is born from the heart of God, or the universal mind. No matter how small or large or visible or invisible, everything is created out of love and for love. Stars are born out of love, and the sun rays burst forth by the attraction of love. Trees shoot up from the loving ground of soil, and birds flock together because of love energy draws them into a community of flight. Love draws down the rain from the clouds to water the earth and the snow to cover the mountains. The warmth of love is felt in fire, and the rage of love is felt when fire gets out of control. Like the winds, love blows where it wills, and nothing can stop it from sweeping the ground on which it travels. So too with human persons. It is love that awakens us in the morning and stretches into the dawn of a new day. It is love that pushes us on through the conflicts of life, leading us through each day, inviting us to an evening rest. It is love that strengthens us in trials, holding us from the brink of despair, and shines a ray of hope in the midst of darkness. It is no wonder that the first opening of the human eyes in a baby is the gaze of love, of wondrous belonging to another. Human birth is released from the darkness of the womb into the light of love, where the first breath of life will yearn for love in a unique and special way. Bonaventure wrote, "You truly exist when you love, not merely where you live." You truly exist where you love, not merely where you live, for love alone is your true home. So there's this idea of a fundamental currency. Teilhard de Chardin saw love as the creative force of the universe. And for him, the discovery by humanity of how to harness the power of love would have an even greater impact than harnessing the power of steam had in the 19th century, or the atom in the 20th century, or the internet in the 21st century. And the way that we harness love is to become it. It says in the Bible that God is love, and in loving, we actually become the creative force that's in the center of all things. Okay, this is how this works. If we're connected to everything, when something comes to us, it's not random. Everything that comes to us is an opportunity for us to respond in love. Good things, bad things, all of them give us an opportunity to respond to the circumstances of our lives in love. The circumstances of our lives, the things that happen to us, are the grist for our mill of love. They are opportunities for us to love. Through the way we respond, we're able to bring love into the world and transform the circumstances around us. And our circumstances are unique to us. No one experiences life like you do, like we do. Everything that happens to us is unique. And no one could do what we do with what comes our way. My life is completely mine. No one could respond to what is happening in my life the way I do. So I have a unique opportunity to express that love. That's why our lives matter, because there is no one else living them. And only we can play the pair of fives from the hand we've been dealt and have that be a winning hand. And when we do that, it affects everything around us. Everything and everyone that we come into contact with is touched by what we do. And it therefore ripples out into an ocean of life, and we can have our effect. And we will never know what that effect will be. Just as Nelson Mandela's mother never knew what effect she had by having that child, or Mother Teresa's father. We never know, but we can know that we've acted out that creative force of love. We've acted out of that. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, says, true generosity is not a trade or a bargaining strategy. It is in true giving, there is no thought of giver. In true giving, there is no thought of giver or recipient. This is called the emptiness of giving, in which there is no perception of separation between the one who gives and the one who receives. This is the practice of generosity given in the spirit of wisdom, with the understanding of interbeing. You offer help as naturally as you breathe. You don't see yourself as a giver and the other person as a recipient of your generosity who is now beholden to you and must be suitably grateful. Respond to your demands and so on. You don't give so you can make the other person your ally. When you see that people need help, you offer and share what you have with no strings attached, no thought of a reward, giving with no expectation of return. Come in and have a seat. There's seats here. And all of this is not to say that if you love like this, it's not to say that if you love like this, you won't get cancer. It's not to say that if you love like this, you won't have problems in your life, that things won't go wrong. That's just to bargain with life. If I'm good, then I'll be okay. No, that's not what's being said here. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I love what he said. He said, the universe has no obligation to make sense to you. The universe has no obligation to make sense to you. Our purpose is not to get rid of our cancer or to become more financially independent or to find a nice home. Our purpose is to respond to the circumstances of our life with love and so become part of that creative force that's at the center of the universe. To become love and therefore to become one with the universal mind that, as Eric suggested, was the divine operating system with life. I'm on my last page. So those of you looking for a purpose in life, this is it. To respond to the circumstances in your life with love by giving with no expectation of return. And by doing this, we become one with the great awakening of which we're part. Rowan Williams said that spirituality was the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. Spirituality is the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. This is that. And when you think of this, you can see how Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching says, your enemy is the shadow that you yourself cast. Your enemy is the shadow that you yourself cast. We share the same reality. We are all part of the same whole. Our enemies are in fact a part of us. And this is why, back to the Bible, because you're in church, this is why you love your neighbor as yourself. Why we do unto others as we would have done to them. All the great and hard spiritual teaching point to this reality. And the evolution of consciousness is gradually moving towards this understanding. To be enlightened is to look at our lives through this lens of understanding, and to live our lives accordingly. This is how we live our lives more skillfully. And how we do that, I'll talk about next week.